Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show.
Friday, March the 4th, 2016, from the DRF studios here in Midtown Manhattan. It's the Matt Bernier Show. The first time we're going to go through and do this thing. My name is Matt Bernier. If you're new to the daily racing form and whatnot, we're live simulcast on DRF Live. You can watch on ESPN.com. They'll bring you over to this side. And if you're as the podcasts are concerned, we can listen on YouTube, SoundCloud, DRF.com. We've got some people here on Periscope as well. This is the maiden voyage, the first time out. Who knows how things are going to go? You need to bear with us a little bit. Maybe some kinks that we need to iron out a little bit through the way. We've got producer Mike Claudio in the back room, Christina Wilson, they're helping out, making sure everything's good to go. And we'll just kind of get on with things here. Before we dive into what the show is actually normally going to be like, I just kind of felt like I should take a couple minutes to explain how this whole thing came about. If any of you are familiar with the Daily Racing Form Players podcast hosted by Peter Thomas Fornatel, DRF tournament editor, and Mike Hogan, I used to be part of that and I enjoyed doing it, and it was really sort of the opposite of what we do on DRF Live on Saturdays with Mike Beer and Dan Ellman. On Saturdays we go through and it's much more produced, it's much more TV sort of. The podcast was always much more sort of free-form radio, having fun, just kind of as if you were at the bar or at a restaurant or just at the racetrack, chopping it up with your friends. Unfortunately, scheduling-wise, it didn't really fit in for me as things continued on, whether I had to go and do some work for NBC or just based on the fact that a lot of the stuff that I focus on day-to-day here at the Forum deals with Southern California, and PPs, as many of you here on the East Coast are familiar with, they don't come out in a timely fashion as far as the day is concerned. So just as a lot of people are getting ready to wrap up here, I'm just finally getting the PPs and diving in. So timing-wise, the podcast being filmed a little bit on the earlier side didn't work out so well, but I didn't want to give up this sort of loose or radio-ish kind of feel. And this has been in the works for a few months now, and we've done some dry runs, but I still stress, bear with us. There's going to be a couple of rocky moments, I'm sure, whether it's a transition from me from a commercial or whatever it may be, but we're excited. We're looking forward to it. We've got a good group of people that have okayed everything, and hopefully the content is going to be good, but we definitely want to hear from you. Obviously, you can follow me on Twitter. You can see it right there at the bottom, at Bernier_Matt. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, fire away, please. At this point, we're willing to take any sort of suggestions and comments, good or bad. If you hate it, if you think that there's something terrible, don't ever do it again. We can move on. But at the end of the day, we'll wait and see what happens, because Christina pops in here real quick. We'll see what happens. Just baby steps, one thing at a time. So just the general philosophy of this whole thing was to just kind of keep some sort of a radio thing going on. We're going to do it once a week right now, starting at noon on the East Coast, 9 a.m. on the Pacific, and we'll bring you through all sorts of good stuff. Hopefully, you guys find it interesting. So let's dive into what the show is normally going to feel like more so. We won't have nearly as much of the sort of intro of what's going on, but we'll dive right into things. And obviously, we've got to go back and look at it and say, the big news thus far, as horse racing is concerned, is obviously the trail to the Kentucky Derby and the Kentucky Derby preps. And recently, Mo Heyman is the horse that everyone's talking about, and rightfully so. He's undefeated. He hasn't done anything wrong for Kieran McLaughlin. And you look at overall what he looks like on the racetrack, he's the picture of what you're looking for in a Derby contender. I think he checks all the boxes at this point. The only question I have is really, and just for those of you who are now watching on DRF Live, you'll see, we'll be changing shots from time to time, but Mo Heyman really hasn't done anything wrong. The only knock that I have, or the only question I have, is he's started 2 times as a 3-year-old, both of them very impressive visually. The problem I have is he's not really getting any faster. Now, he didn't have to do anything last time. He didn't need to go any faster in order to get the job done. He took down a horse in Zulu who was making his first start against graded stakes competition, and he acquitted himself very nicely. The question I have ultimately is I don't know how good Zulu truly is, and I don't know how far he ultimately wants to go, whereas Mo Heyman at this point, he's the leader of the Kentucky Derby point standings, and I think we can take a look at his card. We have that Mike Watchmaker's morning line odds might actually be up there as well. Mike's got him at 5-1 as the favorite, and rightfully so. I mean, this is a horse, again, he hasn't done anything wrong. My only concern is right to the left of the Watchmaker odds. The best buyer of 95, and the reason I say it's a little bit of a concern, I know it's early on, and I've got to keep that in mind still. But the 95 is the same race that he ran in his first start as a 3-year-old back in the Holy Bull, and it's the same number he ran in his last start as a 2-year-old in the Remsen. He hasn't gotten any faster. He's run 3 consecutive 95 buyers. And at the end of the day, again, there's nothing wrong with that. He's checking off the boxes. He's beaten everyone he's supposed to beat, and he's done it visually very impressively. But it just reminded me, I was looking at it a little bit more, and you go through his PPs, and it just kind of struck me, and I thought maybe there's another horse recently that looks kind of similar to him on paper. And I tweeted it out earlier in the week, and we've got the graphic for you that we'll throw it up if you're watching again on DRF Live or you're watching the podcast on YouTube. These are PPs of both Mohaymen and Carpe Diem. Now, when you look at the two of them, I know maybe immediately it doesn't sound like it's an apples to apples sort of comparison, but at the end of the day, look at from their debut, and I'm not just saying it because they were debuted in sprints and they stretched out, but these are horses that were fast early as 2-year-olds. They continued on. They were undefeated essentially. I understand Carpe Diem lost in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but that was an odd race for him. But you look at the way that he progressed, and he just was taking baby steps, and I know that final prep for him before the Derby, the 95, that was when a lot of people really looked at Carpe Diem and said, he's not getting any better. Now look, Mohaymen is going to have one more start. It looks like he's going to take on Nyquist in the final prep in the Florida Derby. And look, maybe that's going to be really the Kentucky Derby. We're looking at the top 2 runners in that spot right now. But if he doesn't move forward, if he doesn't take that step forward, and I just want to stress, I think he's capable of doing so. If he doesn't move forward, boy, do you want to go into the Derby betting on a short price with a horse that really has not gone any faster since the final race of his 2-year-old campaign? Again, I'm not suggesting that's what's going to happen. I'm not suggesting he's going to turn into Carpe Diem. I think he's probably got a little bit more ability than Carpe Diem did. But it is a little bit odd now that we're not getting any faster as the races continue on. And I look at it and say this weekend we've got a big race coming up here in New York in the Gotham. And another horse that's owned by Shadwell. You've got Shagaf. He's going to be running. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. But there's a lot of horses in this sort of cluster at the top, I think. I understand a lot of people, me included for a little while, wanted to say it's Mohaymen, it's Nyquist, it's More Spirit, and then it's probably everyone else. We're getting a little bit further down the line, getting a little bit closer to those final preps. I'm not so sure that the difference between the top and the bottom is all that great. Mohaymen, I think, is deservedly the #1 seed. I know some people want to say Nyquist is. That's fine. I'm not going to argue with you. Nyquist is undefeated. He hasn't done anything wrong either. He just needs to run fast going around 2 turns for me to fully buy into Nyquist. I don't know how far he ultimately will want to go. But Mohaymen, he's beaten everyone he's supposed to beat. He's done it visually spectacularly. The last thing he's got to prove to me is that he can ultimately run faster than he has at this point in his career. We'll find out if he's capable. If not, I think there's going to be a lot of people that will be burning some money here shortly on in the Kentucky Derby. We're going to take a quick break, the first break of the day. When we come back, we'll dive into some DRF Plus headlines that we've accumulated throughout the week. And we'll go through those later on in the show. We'll go over some handicapping, get you ready for 4 stakes races this weekend. All of them will be here on DRF Live. Stay with us on the Matt Bernier Show.
The new DRF tournament site is your one-stop tournament headquarters with a complete roster of all NHC Qualify, BC Qualify, and DRF Qualify tournaments. Play in our new feeder tournaments, and you could win your way into a weekend qualifying tournament. It's easy to play, at home or on your mobile device. Fund your account with tournament credits and choose the tournaments you want to play in. Make your selections and track your progress throughout the day, no matter where you are, using our redesigned leaderboards. All players need to register for the new DRF tournament platform, even if you have an existing NHC Qualify, BC Qualify, or DRF Qualify account. It only takes a minute, so register today. Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
10 after 12 on the East Coast, 10 after 9 on the West Coast, the Matt Bernier Show. We are live on DRF Live. You can listen to the podcast in a multitude of forms later on once we get that recorded and put up. I think now it's time we're going to transition. This is going to be a normal sort of segment with this show going forward. These are going to be headlines from DRF Plus that we've pulled throughout the week, probably the most pertinent ones going forward, and try to give you a little bit of info from all of our great reporters and handicappers at the track. Let us dive in, if I can find it on here, to some headlines.
Headlines.
All right, let's dive into the first one. Mike Welsh recorded this yesterday. This is a discussion about the Rainbow Six with a mandatory payout on March the 26th. Now, right now, we're looking at it coming into today. I believe the carryover is in the vicinity of $2.27 million. Coming into Friday, the Rainbow Pick Six will kick off here in, a couple hours at this point, at 10 after 12, so probably right around 3 o'clock or so. That's when today's Rainbow Six will kick off. If you get involved in that, obviously you can play on DRF Bets. And by the way, this entire segment, headlines, see it right down the bottom there, brought to you by DRF Plus. You're going to want to get involved. That's the news feed right below us right now. The most interesting thing about that date being set of March 26th, it's the week before the Florida Derby, the Saturday before the Florida Derby. It's a soft Saturday from a stakes standpoint. There really isn't a ton of big sort of graded stakes action going on because all that's going to be leading up to the final sort of weekend, their final big weekend, when you've got the final Derby prep down there, the Florida Derby, and you have a couple other big races as well. So at this point, that's what it looks like. It's going to go right through, and as we've discussed on DRF Live on Saturdays, it's at the point now, I understand some people at the very beginning wanted to bellyache a little bit about the takeout, and it's not worth your time, and da-da-da-da-da. At the end of the day, we're at such a huge number in the carryover, it makes no sense not to play. You're almost looking at it from a positive expectation, and maybe if it's not truly a positive expectation because you do still need to hit it, it's at a significantly reduced takeout. And you can look at it, and I mean, some of these sequences that are paying, with the biggest price being a $12 horse, paying $3,000 for a 20-cent base increment. I think it's a very fantastic bet. I think at this point, it takes a little while for it to get going, but once it finally garners some steam, I think that's where you want to go. Let's move on to Mary Rampolini. She filed something about Ivan falling of a lot. He's going to scratch from the hot springs on Saturday. We'll have that race for you on DRF Live. The big thing there, and we'll talk about that race here momentarily, he's diagnosed with a quarter crack last week, and I think it changes the complexion of that race completely because there were 3 horses particularly that I think a lot of people were going to key in on, he being one of them, and then 2 others who we'll talk about here shortly. The problem is now you take him out, it makes one of those other horses, I think, that much more tough to deal with, and I think it makes him a much more likely winner. Again, I don't want to tease too much of it, but you can see over in the left-hand bar. We'll get into that in the handicapping preview. They'll reroute. They'll point to the Grade 3 Count Fleet on April the 10th. Look, whether he can go into that with only one race of his sort of 2016 campaign under his belt, we'll find out. He's a really good horse when he's on his game. It's going to be a lot because he's going to face a lot of these same horses that he would have seen here Saturday afternoon, and as well as some new shooters. I'm sure you'll see a horse like a Holy Boss or someone else show up as well. So, unfortunately, no Ivan falling over a lot coming up tomorrow, but we'll see him in April. Marcus Hurst solo wins the Dubai Turf Prep in Shanti for himself. He won the race last year. The interesting thing about this prep for him for the Dubai Turf, it was run over poly track, 7th consecutive victory. He hasn't done anything wrong. The scariest thing is that trainer Freddie Head, who's trained some good ones, Goldakova, name rings a bell for you. He said that this horse may be better this year than he was last year, which is stunning considering a lot of people considered him the best horse in the world. If you think about that, and then he may actually be better this year, they're going to have to have him tied on tight if they're going to beat him in the Dubai Turf here in a few weeks out at Meydan. Mike Welsh again, Gulfstream closes its doors to Payson Park due to the equine herpes virus. Obviously, that's a major concern. They've dealt with it at Sunland Park recently. It's been going around a little bit from place to place, and it's a major issue for the horse population. Tampa Bay Downs as well has limited the people coming from Payson Park. There's a 21-day quarantine set up, pending test results. They could possibly be able to come in after that. But it's had some legitimate effects on the racing already thus far, and I think going forward it will as well, simply because you've got big barns that are stabled at Payson. You've got Bill Mott, you've got Shug McGahee, you've got Christophe Clement. Until that 21-day sort of quarantine is up, you're not going to have any of those horses coming from their barns, shipping into Gulfstream or shipping into Tampa. So it's going to change the complexion, I think, a little bit, maybe even to this Triple Crown chase and the Derby Trail, getting some points. It'll be interesting to see just how many horses are affected by this, but knock on wood, they'll get everything under control, and we won't have to worry about this going forward. But they're doing it the right way. Unfortunately, if this is the safest thing for the entire horse population in Florida, you have to do what you have to do, and hopefully they get it under control. Mike Welsh again. FNX is to make a seasonal debut in the Santa Anita Handicap next weekend. Huge weekend of racing out at the Great Race Place. I think this is fantastic. That this horse, I know for a little while they were talking about sending him over to Dubai, running in the World Cup. FNX is one of my sons. If any of you have paid attention to DRF Live or my Twitter, @Bernier_Matt. FNX opportunity, Cyrus Alexander, Texas Red, now Dazzling Gem, who we'll talk about. Doesn't mean that they're awesome, but they're some of my favorites, and they can run a little bit. The fact that they're going to look at it and say, you know what, rather than go to Dubai, let's go over to Santa Anita, we'll run in the big cap. You've got no Dortmund. You've got no California Chrome. You likely don't have Opportunity. I mean, you look at the list of contenders for that race now, we're talking about Donworth, who I think has a world of ability. Imperative. I think he's a really nice horse, but you're probably not shaking in your boots. Other than that, I mean, it feels a little bit suspect considering we have no Beholder, we don't have any of the big boys sticking around. FNX going there for Jimmy Jerkins I think is a brilliant move. I think he's going to be a major player in there. The way that track plays, obviously forwardly placed can be beneficial. I think he has that ability to be close as he was as far as the Breeders' Cup Classic is concerned. The other good thing is he'll be ridden again by Mike Smith, who rode him in the Breeders' Cup, as well as the Clark Handicap that he won at Churchill Downs. Mary Rampolini, untappable. She was a champion 2 years ago. She works towards the Grade 3 Azeri on March 19th, a 5/8 bullet in 1:04. So need to be much better than she was as a 3-year-old, because her form last year was just, or as a 4-year-old rather, because she was dreadful. She was just not the same filly that she was when she was 3 when she won the championship. If she can somehow get back to that 3-year-old form, she's a major player. But boy, she's going to need to prove it to me, and I know she's going to be a short price again. Very likely, depending on what the field looks like, I wouldn't be afraid to take a shot against her until she shows me she's back to being the goods. Probably the feel-good story of the entire week. Mike Vesey, Lady Eli, back on the tab, works 3/8 down at Palmettos. This is her first time working out since being diagnosed with laminitis last year. After she won the Belmont Oaks, she stepped on a nail, unfortunately. And look, the fact that she even came back and could have a future as a mom is a major step, a major positive. The fact that she's back at the racetrack and actually working out is borderline miracle-like. We've seen some horses that have had laminitis and unfortunately to their demise, but at the same time, the fact that this horse is back, and if she ever even sniffs a race again, it'll be a minor miracle, but I love the fact that she's back. It sounds like she came out of it very well. Chad Brown said day by day, week by week right now, but they're very excited with the progress that she's made. You got to look at it and say that's the feel-good story thus far of 2016. And we'll wrap things up with a new addition to the DRF PPs. I believe Kenny Peck is really the brainchild of this entire thing. It's called Pace Ace. They will be in the daily racing form, and really it's just basically something to help you take a look at the race flow or the race shape of certain races, whether it was a hot pace, a slow pace, and how to factor that into your handicapping. There's an article online that you can read that Kenny wrote about, and I think he's going to be putting them up in the feed below us here on DRF Live and DRF Plus. He also did a video earlier in the week with Dan Illman kind of explaining what the Pace Ace is all about. So definitely something you're going to want to take a look at. A new addition to the daily racing form, past performances, Pace Ace. Headlines. Done. Take a breath. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. It's time to dive into some Derby talk. It's everyone's favorite time of year. We'll talk about the top 20 standings, as well as some of the horses that I'm interested in. Stay tuned. The Matt Bernier Show.
Does your online wagering platform want you to win? If they did, wouldn't they help you win? At DRF Bets, we're all about raising your game. That's why we give our players the data, tools, and know-how that no other service can. For starters, DRF Bets is the only place you can get free DRF PPs when you wager. But we don't stop at PPs. With free access to DRF Plus, DRF Bets members get the kind of insider information you can't get from a PP. Like behind-the-scenes news coverage and live trackside reporting about changing conditions, biases, workouts, and more, right from the horse's mouth. Plus, free DRF selections, closer looks, and a full range of premium reports, like our popular daily game plan. And since 70% of betting is on exotics, DRF Bets provides special support for players, including weekly bonuses and our exclusive Ticket Maker wagering app. that helps you win more on exotic wagers. We've also made rewards simple. The DRF Bets Rewards program gives you back more of what you wager, period. DRF Bets is more than a place to wager. It's a platform to help you play better and win more, whether you're home or on the go. Brought to you by the folks who love racing as much as you do. Does your wagering platform do all of that?
.1221, Matt Bernier Show on the East Coast, 9:21 on the West Coast. It's time for everyone's favorite segment, their favorite thing to talk about this time of year. Early March, even late February, but we're diving into it. It's time, Derby talk. Everyone likes it. Let's first take a look at the updated top 20 leaderboard as far as the Derby point standing is concerned. And really, the big news, no surprise, Mo Heyman locked himself in, gunrunner. Basically, keep in mind, the top of the leaderboard doesn't matter nearly as much as the bottom of the leaderboard does. And this is going to change greatly over the next few weeks. It's going to change tomorrow with the Gotham, simply because right now we're at those 50-point Derby preps. So the winner gets 50, the runner-up gets 20, third gets 10. 20 has always been sort of that magic number ever since we've brought in and adopted this new point system, where to get into the Derby, it's not graded stakes earnings anymore, it's the points. And 20 for the past 2 years has really been kind of the threshold that you need to be right at. If you get into that 25 range, you're good. You're all locked in. So basically, those top 5, I'm going to go out on a limb and say are completely locked in. And I'll also say Forever Mo and Zulu, if they chose, if their connections so choose to go on with it, or hopefully health-wise, they're going to be in. Everyone else here is going to need to do some work. The other thing to keep in mind is, though, a lot of the names on this leaderboard, fair chance you don't see them go on. Aeroforce, I'd be stunned if we saw him go on. Collected, I got to be honest, for Baffer, I don't know where he stands. I'd be surprised if they go on with him. Frank Conversation, thus far, has shown to be very, very happy on the synthetic surfaces. He's a decent turf horse. I don't know if he can run on dirt. That'll be an interesting spot to see where they go. If they choose a race like the Spiral at Turfway, which is still over synthetic surface, or they want to try to see if he can run on the dirt at all. But you've got some horses on here and some horses that haven't shown up yet. That these new points races and the bigger ones, the bigger the points get, the bigger the stakes get. Ultimately, if you run 1 or 2 in these 50-point races, you're basically going to lock yourself into the Derby. If you get to the final preps, when your win gets you 100 points and second gets you 50 and 20 and so on, boy, I mean, that's when you really, these first ones obviously getting 5, 10 points here and there, those are important. But down the road, that's going to be very, very insignificant for most of these horses. You got to keep in mind, because a lot of them, they're not cut out for the distance. A horse like Discreetness, I think he's got a ton of ability. I just don't know how far he wants to go. And I don't know if the connections are going to choose to trudge on with him. But it'll be interesting to see. You're going to start to separate the contenders from the pretenders and the actual meant horses for the Derby compared to the horses that said, you know what, we're early 3-year-olds, we're feeling good, we're precocious, we can go out there and take a mile sort of race that's going to get you some points. Now, everyone and their brother has a top 5 or a top 10. I get it. You want to roll your eyes and say, who cares? Well, it's part of the fun. Part of the fun. So let's dive into my top 5. Let's take it from the top. Number 1, Mo Heyman. Let's take a look at his most recent victory in the Fountain of Youth.
Who is taking the lead on the outside. Mo Heyman to the front, pulling away from Zulu. Fellowship is third as Mo Heyman pulls away. And Mo Heyman remains unbeaten, winning the Fountain of Youth over Zulu.
Larry Colmus with the call down at Gulfstream Park. Obviously, again, we talked about it. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's a horse that goes out, he looks the part, he's professional. He had a little bit of adversity too. Going into that first turn, you had the crazy headstrong horse. I can't remember what his name is at this point, but he was rank and he was throwing his head about and there was a little bit of contact. He's shown he can overcome adversity, he can adapt to different pace scenarios. He checks all the boxes except for what I talked about at the top of the show. He's just going to need to run faster if he's going to be looked at as a legitimate contender. My number 2 horse called More Spirit, and we're going to take a look at his most recent victory right now. The concern I have for More Spirit is he had a little bit of a, I don't want to call it a missed workout. It was an aborted workout, and if you're watching on DRF Live, you're seeing him. This was him, I believe, in the San Felipe. Look, he got the job done. He did everything he was supposed to. The Robert Lewis, San Felipe's coming up. Thank you, producer Mike in my ear. He had a little bit of a hiccup where Gary Stevens aborted a work in the middle of last week. He came back and he worked well on Sunday, so I suppose he didn't really miss any sort of time. That San Felipe, if that's where they do choose to go, and I believe it's contingent on how he works this week. If they think he needs another week, they're going to wait and they'll send him to the Revel down at Oaklawn Park. At least that's what the word is. If he works well, maybe the San Felipe comes into play. But it'll be interesting. Again, you can buy yourself a little bit of time this time of year. If you're a legitimate 3-year-old and a legitimate Derby contender, missing any time is just so critical. If you miss a week or you miss 2 workouts or whatever it is, it's so hard to come back with these 3-year-olds. They develop so quickly, and if you get behind the 8 ball, it's hard to overcome, but I still think more Spirit. He's a good looker. Number 3 in here, Nyquist. Let's take a look at his return to the races, winning the San Vicente.
Nyquist at the top of the stretch is the leader. Exaggerator puts a stern test to him, and Denman's Call is running on very nicely, but with 1/8 of a mile to go, Nyquist is still under a hand ride. Exaggerator keeps trying him, but he cannot go with Nyquist, and the champ is back in fine fashion. Nyquist takes the San Vicente.
Frank Miramati with the call from Santa Anita, and the champ was back, and he looked very good. Now the concern is, how far does he ultimately want to go? These Uncle Mo's are brilliant, but I talked to Mike Watchmaker earlier in the week during this weekend's Weekend Warrior, and he said it himself. He goes, right now it'll be interesting to see. Everyone loves them. The Uncle Mo's, they look fantastic out on the racetrack. I wonder how far they're ultimately going to want to go, because Uncle Mo himself was much more of a mile or a middle distance horse, as was his sire, Indian Charlie. It'll be interesting to see how many of these horses want to continue on as the distances get further. Some people probably look at it and say the fact that I have him number 3 is a little bit disrespectful. The 2-year-old undefeated champion. At the end of the day, run fast going 2 turns. He ran fast. I'll give him that. He got the 100 buyer in that San Vicente. Stretch out to 2 turns, and boy, he's going to get the ultimate acid test, because it sounds like they're going to Gulfstream Park for their little bit of a bonus from phasing Tipton, an extra $1 million if he wins the Florida Derby. Number 4 is another Uncle Mo for myself. It's Mo Tom. Let's take a look at how he ran in his most recent start in the Risen Star. It was a very, very eventful trip for this horse. Corey Lannery had him down on the inside. He does his best running from the back of the pack. And again, if you're watching on DRF Live right now, you're going to see him. He's in the teal silks. He's got an alter course. He checks a little bit down on the inside. He could have packed it in, and no one would have faulted him. He actually gashed himself with that little bit of a hiccup. He re-rallies and finishes full of run. He's the only one running here at the end. Gunrunner is on the lead. He's going to ultimately win. Forever Mo, I think he's much more of a miler. Motown runs on well and gallops out well. This may be the Uncle Mo thus far that I think has the most ability to go further. I don't know how good he ultimately will be. I think he has some ability. But of all the Uncle Mo's I've seen so far, I think he's the one that I could project the distance isn't going to be much of a problem for him. And number 5, feel free. I'm waiting for it. All the hate mail on Twitter, @Bernier_Matt. I have to put my son, Dazzling Gem, on here. He has 0 Derby points, as you can see in the lower bar right now, the lower third. I get it. He's going to need to face graded stakes competition. Let's take a look at his most recent start. This was his first time against winners. I was much more down on this performance than a lot of people were. He looks goofy. He's bad with the lead change. It took him a very long time. But I suppose I'm probably being a little bit harsh. Again, his first time against winners. He got the job done. He got an 83 buyer for this effort. It sounds like trainer Brad Cox, who's on the upcoming swing as far as the hot young trainers are concerned, it sounds like they're going to the Rebel with him. And look, you've got to find out what you've got. I'm cautiously optimistic. The only reason he's on there, I have a Derby future on him. Until he loses or is off the trail, that's when I'll throw him out. But at the end of the day, I have him in there at number 5 as far as my top 5. And can we throw that up one more time? I love the $200 speed-up bonus. We'll talk about that more at the end. Can we take a look at the top 5, Mike? There it is. Mo Heyman 1, More Spirit 2, Nyquist 3, Mo Tom 4, Dazzling Gem 5. I want to give acknowledgement to sudden breaking news because he hasn't done anything wrong. He can be vying for a spot back in this little top 5 as well. But a lot of things I'm sure will change. We'll find out. Maybe the Gotham this weekend will alter this top 5 a little bit. We'll take a quick break at 12:29 on the East Coast. When we come back, we'll dive into some handicapping. We'll give you some most likely winners, some live long shots, as well as vulnerable favorites here on the Matt Bernier Show. Stay with us.
The new DRF tournament site is your one-stop tournament headquarters with a complete roster of all NHC Qualify, BC Qualify, and DRF Qualify tournaments. Play in our new feeder tournaments, and you could win your way into a weekend qualifying tournament. It's easy to play, at home or on your mobile device. Fund your account with tournament credits and choose the tournaments you want to play in. Make your selections and track your progress throughout the day, no matter where you are, using our redesigned leaderboards. All players need to register for the new DRF tournament platform, even if you have an existing NHC Qualify, BC Qualify, or DRF Qualify account. It only takes a minute, so register today.
Back here on the Matt Bernier Show on DRF Live. We're simulcasting live on DRF Live, as well as some other avenues. If you're going to listen to the podcast in future dates, it'll be on YouTube, it'll be on SoundCloud, it'll also be available on drf.com. 12:31 on the East, 9:31 on the West Coast. Let's dive into some handicapping. At the end of the day, this is a handicapping sort of racing, sports talk show, whatever you want to call it. But there's always going to be handicapping involved because that's what we do. We like to bet, we like to gamble, and you can play on DRF bets with a lot of these. So let's first dive into the, I don't know if this is the highlight of the weekend, but I think this is the race that's going to get the most attention simply because it's a Derby prep. And this handicapping preview, by the way, brought to you by DRF Formulator. The power of DRF Formulator can make good handicappers better bettors and vice versa. So if you want to dive in, check out DRF Formulator. The Gotham Stakes up here at Aqueduct is going to be run on the inner track. Pretty soon we're going to be transferring back over to the main track at Aqueduct. But the Gotham is a really interesting race, and we're going to use my little soundboard here in front of me, see how it works. I think there's a horse in here that's going to go off favored. I don't think he's anything close to a slam dunk. Let's talk about him. I think he's a
Vulnerable favorite.
Vulnerable favorite, if you couldn't hear that. I think Shagaf is far from, Mike's telling me it's working. I think Shagaf is far from a slam dunk in this spot. I know he's been the talk of the town for a long time. We can take a look. This was his 3-year-old debut down at Gulfstream Park most recently. Look, he's okay. He goes out, he does everything like he's supposed to. He did it in a workmanlike manner, though. And I think a lot of people expected a lot better from this horse, considering the hype and the pub surrounding him, especially considering there was a horse in this race that he'll face in the Gotham Rally Cry on the far outside. He's hanging on his left lead. He's very green, which is unlike a Pletcher, but the rider had to get into Shagaf a little bit. Radote's going to stay aboard for this horse. He's 3-1 on the morning line. I think he's a vulnerable favorite in this spot simply because I think he's going to be much shorter than 3-1. I wouldn't be surprised if we're looking at 7-5. I think he should personally be in that 9-2 range. And I know that's impossible. He's never going to be that high. But at the end of the day, and if he is for some reason, he's probably got 3 legs. But at 9-2, that's kind of what I'm looking at. And I know this is going to be a race for me personally. It'll be on live.drf.com tomorrow afternoon, starting at 3 Eastern. But this isn't the kind of race that I'm going to be having a ton of money into simply because I don't love anyone. I'm a big fan of Sonny Ridge. I could almost say he's almost one of my sons. I liked him in the Champagne. He couldn't quite get the job done. I thought he was very decent in that Withers. His most recent start, his first start as a 3-year-old. He's obviously, I think, the horse to beat in this spot simply because he's done it. He's won at the track. He's run reasonably fast races. And look, if Shagaf can rebound and go back to the 88 Beyer that he earned in his debut, he has every reason to move forward. But boy, that last effort, Now it's going to be his first start back up here on the inner dirt, going 2 turns. He's going to be a short price. Like I said, I think he's going to be in that 7-5 range, and I believe he belongs in that 9-2 range. You can have him at a short number. I think Shagaf is a vulnerable favorite in the Grade 3 Gotham. Let's go down to Gulfstream Park, the Grade 2 Gulfstream Park Handicap. It's the 11th race carded on Saturday. It's a 1-turn mile. You've got a field of 7. This might as well be called the Todd Pletcher Invitational because Pletcher's got 4 of them in this spot. I personally think the most likely winner is Valid. I think Valid is a very good horse. He's an underrated horse. We've talked about it multiple times. I don't love the fact that he's goofy with his lead changes, but he ran a bang-up race going 2 turns at 1 1/8 in his most recent start in the Don Handicap against a horse in M. Shawish, who's going to go over to the World Cup. He's going to run in Dubai. It looks like he's going to fit the bill. Valid's just a really tough, hard-knocking horse. I talked to Mike Watchmaker earlier in the week about it. The only concern has to be, how many times can you go to the well? How many times can this horse run a 103 or a 102 Beyer consecutively? Because he hasn't had a break since the beginning of December of 2014. Not 2015, 2014. He's been on the go for like 13 months at this point. He hasn't had a break, even more than that, 15 months. Math on the fly is not one of my strong suits. I think he's the most likely winner. I think he should be 5-2. He was made 5-2 on the morning line. I think getting back to this 1-turn mile is really what's going to be most beneficial for him. I understand some people want to say 2 turns because he runs so well at Monmouth Park, and he's run well. Look, we just saw it. He ran a bang-up race in the Don. But I think he's better going a 1-turn mile, even 7 furlongs. You get him in that range, I think he can run a little bit. I don't know that he's truly a grade 1 sort when you get him out of South Florida, you get him away from Monmouth Park. I don't think he's really a Met Mile kind of horse. But he shows up and he runs his race each and every time. And you've got to admire that. If you're a fan of the game, we're all wagerers, we're all gamblers. We all like to have a little coin, a little skin in the game. But at the same time, I know not everyone is a huge fan, but a lot of us anyway, I can only speak for the people here in the racing form. A lot of us here are deep down diehard fans, and even if we couldn't wager ever again, we would still be interested in the game because we love the stories and we love the personal connections and whatever it may be. Valid is a horse that you have to root for. You have to root for him because he goes out and he does his job. He shows up each and every time. He's over $1 million banked, or he's close to $1 million. This race would likely put him over $1 million in career earnings. He's 11 for 35 lifetime. I think Valid is the horse to beat in the Gulfstream Park handicap. Let's move on to a live long shot in this spot. It's one of the 4 Pletchers. Let me get the soundboard again. We've got to iron out the kinks a little bit. Here we are.
Live long shot.
Live long shot. I think a sneaky horse, and I understand maybe he just can't run anymore. I think the 7 Anchored Down. Drawn outside for Pletcher. Jose Lezcano has the mount. Maybe it's all we need to know that Javier was on this horse last time out in his first start as a 5-year-old, and now Javier goes aboard Stanford, another one of Pletcher runners. But Anchored Down was involved early on in a pretty spirited pace duel with a couple runners, and we can actually take a look at that most recent start. We don't have this one. I have my little sticky note right here. I should have been paying attention to it. You go through and you look, Can Dip and Trouble Kid are 2 legitimately good sprinters. Now, Trouble Kid's off form at this point, but Can Dip came back last weekend. And maybe he didn't give XY Jet everything he wanted or everything he could handle, but he gave him a pretty serious test coming around the far turn and down the lane. Anchored Down, considering that was his first start since October up at Belmont Park, going 6 furlongs, involved in a spirited pace duel. He himself, you go into formulator, you can break it down into incremental splits. He himself going 22-1 for the opening quarter. I know for the half, as far as his elapsed pace is concerned, 44-1. That's a legitimate half mile, even at Gulfstream. I wonder if he's going to get a little bit of fitness out of that. He's going to be forwardly placed in a race where I don't think there's a ton of speed. Valid, we just talked about it, and it sounds like Marcus Vitale, his trainer, is going to ultimately want Valid to have a target in front of him. If that's the case, you're going to have a horse like Anchored Down who could get out there. We've seen Gulfstream Park in the past be speed-friendly and be very kind to speed. Would it stun you at all if all of a sudden we had a pretty souped-up track and Anchored Down got out there and got brave? And I understand going from 6 to 8 is a pretty big jump. But this horse has shown in the past that he's got ability. I think he's 6-1 on the line. I don't think that's going to be accurate. I've got him at 9-1. I think he's probably going to be in that 7-8-1 range. If he's at 9-1, I think Anchored Down's a sneaky little play here from a pace angle in the Gulfstream Park handicap. And you just saw that bottom third. We're talking about speed. Why not get a speed up bonus? Go sign up for DRF Bets. You can get up to $200 bonus going on, huh? Let's take a quick break. We got 2 more races that we need to go over as far as the handicapping segment of the Matt Bernier Show is concerned. 2 more, the McDermott of the Hot Springs, when we come back on the Matt Bernier Show.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticket Maker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticket Maker, the exotic wagering app.
Does your online wagering platform want you to win? If they did, wouldn't they help you win? At DRF Bets, we're all about raising your game. That's why we give our players the data, tools, and know-how that no other service can. DRF Bets is more than a place to wager. It's a platform to help you play better and win more. Brought to you by the folks who love racing as much as you do.
Back here, Matt Bernier Show, about 20:01 on the East Coast, 20 of 10 on the West Coast. If you're listening, having a little bit of coffee with your breakfast, getting ready, going into the office. Here on the East Coast, we're getting ready to eat some lunch. Let's dive in. We got two more races that we need to preview from a handicapping standpoint. One of them at Gulfstream, the other one in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and no coincidence, it's called the Hot Springs. Let's start off with the McDermott, though. Marathon on the turf, the temporary rail scheduled to be at 24 feet, race for 4-year-olds and up. It's a really interesting race. It's not a huge field, but considering, and let's just be totally transparent. If you pay attention to DRF Live, you know that I have been probably the harshest critic as far as our older sort of marathon turf runners are concerned. I think there's a couple of decent ones in here. And maybe they can ultimately stamp themselves as the horses to beat going long in this division going forward throughout the rest of the year. The McDermott, the most likely winner.
Most likely winner.
I think it's strictly Mr. Maybe for Chad Brown. Mr. Maybe has been just an absolutely different animal since Chad Brown's gotten a hold of him. And I know this is going to be his debut as a 5-year-old. Javier is going to take them out. We can take a look. This was about as impressive a turf race as you're going to see. This was back in November up at Aqueduct. If you're watching on DRF Live, he's got the pink hat on the outside, and he's starting to roll along. He's going to change leads and kick on. Chad's gotten him the 2 turf races that he's run with Chad from a Beyer standpoint. 101 Beyer, 104 Beyer in the Red Smith handicap. And I understand. Look, he was beating Kagan. He was beating Holiday Star. I believe Mr. Speaker was in this race. Might have been Mr. Speaker's last race. But Mr. Maybe has the ability that, you know, right now, if he can run those sort of races time and time again, he fits right there with the Big Blue Kitten, who's going to be coming back. He's going to have different colors this year, I believe. I believe he was sold from Ken and Sarah Ramsey to Calumet Farms, but there's no reason that Mr. Maybe can't be a serious player in these sort of long marathon, long-winded races, because if he can run like that with a slow pace in front of him in the middle of November in New York when it's probably freezing cold, why can't he do that in the beginning of March down at Gulfstream Park? We'll find out. He's brought his races from track to track. The distance is going to be no issue for him. He's 2 for 2 at it. I think Mr. Maybe is strictly the horse to beat. He's 4 to 1 on the morning line. He's 3 to 1 as far as I'm concerned. Anything above that is an overlay. But you start to look at it, and you also want to try to get some sort of a live long shot involved.
Live long shot.
And I'll admit, I don't know if this horse is good enough right now. And I don't know if he can run the distance and stay on with these sorts. But all included is kind of sneaky, underrated, disrespected. Because this is a horse, you look at his past 5 races, I should say. You've got 4 triple-digit Beyer speed figures in there. And the race 3 back, that tropical turf handicap, draw a line through it. And I understand it looks and it says firm. That was as far from a firm racetrack at Gulfstream West as I've ever seen. There's standing water on the turf course. So draw a line through that. You draw a line through that race. He's got 4 consecutive triple-digit Beyers. I know he hasn't won any of them, but let's take a look at his most recent start. That was in the Gulfstream Park Turf Handicap. He was running up against some good runners in here. Luke Sally is a legitimate Grade 1 sort. Take over target. Nothing, no slouch. And if we're watching on DRF Live, you can see this horse. He's down on the inside, and I really think it just got a little bit tight on him. Shining Copper was setting the pace. I don't think he wanted to squeeze through on the inside. Now, look, 2 questions that I'm sure, and I think they're totally valid questions. Is he good enough? I don't know. I don't know if he's as good as a Mr. Maybe or the Big Hoss, who's razor sharp. His run in the John B. Connolly at Sam Houston was a thing of beauty. And Florent Giroux is sneaky, one of the best riders in the country. I think he should be getting many more mounts, and I would love to see him up in New York over the course of the summer at Saratoga. I digress. All included, if he can stretch out in a race where there's not a ton of pace, I think he could be sneaky in here. You've got Twilight Eclipse in here, who's, look, rock solid, really nice horse, a cool horse that you can root for. At the end of the day, he didn't like to win very often. I'm not saying he can't win. And I could almost make the case, I didn't make him a vulnerable favorite. He's 2 to 1 on the morning line. I don't think he's going to be favored. I think he might be the 3rd choice in this spot. Mr. Maybe's going to be the favorite, I think. I'd be stunned if he's not. But all included, I think with that sneaky tactical speed, he can be forwardly placed in a race. Doesn't have a ton of speed. All included, he's 10-1 on the line. I think he should be 6. Johnny V takes them out. Maybe he can get out there and get brave going long. We've seen speed is lethal. Yesterday's formulated race of the day, Red Tide Day. That was in Southern California, in Santa Anita. Mario Gutierrez, Richard Baltas, speed, speed, speed. Get to the front and go. Don't worry about it. Let's go on to our 4th and final race from a handicapping standpoint this weekend. We have no replays for any of them, but that's fine. We can talk about the big story, though, with the Hot Springs, the 8th race at Oaklawn Park on Saturday. Again, all 4 of these races that we're talking about, you're going to be able to see them tomorrow starting 3 Eastern on DRF Live, right here in the same spot. You'll start the day with Dan Elm and Mike Beer. I'll come in later on. This race lost a little bit of its luster with the scratch of Ivan falling over a lot because he's got a quarter crack. They're going to reroute him and point toward that Count Fleet Sprint, Count Fleet Handicap down at Oaklawn Park. And I'm sure this is going to be a stepping stone for most of these horses going forward as well. I think the fact that you scratch that horse, that makes one horse particularly salty in here.
Most likely winner.
Most likely winner. The one, Subtle Indian, drawn on the inside. He's coming off of just his 2 races thus far in 2016 have been ballistic. Most recent start, he got a 102. 2 starts back, he got a 95 buyer. This is a horse that if he gets to the front, he doesn't lose. He's 5 for 7 lifetime, and the 2 times that he didn't run, he was essentially eased. I don't want to say broke down, but he eased. He was eased. This is a horse that he's got legitimate early gas. He's drawn down on the inside for Robertino Diodoro. And I think that's the biggest thing, though. If you still had a horse like Ivan Fallen Ovalot, who can keep a horse like Subtle Indian honest, if he was still in the race, all of a sudden I'm looking at Subtle Indian saying, you know what, you're going to be facing legitimate heat from a legitimate runner. Ivan Fallen Ovalot can get some, he's salty. Remember, this is a horse that ran, I know he ran in the Breeders' Cup last year, not so well, but he's not that far behind the top sprinters in the country from a talent standpoint. Subtle Indian, he's showing himself to be a legitimate sort of graded stakes runner. If he can run well here and he can move forward, the biggest thing I have, though, for a problem, he's the most likely winner in this race simply because he's got more early gas than anybody else does. Alsvid's a really nice runner, but he's going to have to be doing a ton of running to run this one down because he's going to be out there winging it on the front end. If for some reason Subtle Indian stubs his toe, which I don't think is likely. I think he's the most likely winner. He's 8-5 on the line. I think he should be 8-5 as well. About 38% chance of winning. If for some reason he stubs his toe, Alsvid is a very logical alternative, but I can't call him a live long shot. He's 4-1 on the line. He's going to be the second choice. I think he should be 9-5. We're looking for a little bit of a live long shot.
Live long shot.
I don't know if he can win. But at the end of the day, a live long shot doesn't have to particularly win. You can use them in a multitude of different ways if you're going to be using them in an exacta, a trifecta, a super, whatever you want. The 5 Bordini for Cheryl Weinbaum. This is a horse, the 2 most recent starts have been the 2 best starts of this one's career. Both of them at Oaklawn Park. I don't think there's any coincidence with that. We've seen some horses that can take their track from place to place or take their race from place to place. A lot of horses seem to really like that surface down at Oaklawn, and that's when they kind of produce their best efforts. Past 2 races, an 81 buyer and an 89 buyer in the most recent start. This one has a little bit of early speed. And look, he's not nearly as fast as Subtle Indian. Subtle Indian, if he breaks and goes, it's going to be really, really difficult to run him down. Bordini is 20-1 on the morning line. I think from a win standpoint, he should be 19-1. That doesn't mean I think he should be 19-1 when we're talking about an exacta for second or a triple to round out your sort of things in second and third. I think he's a horse who's going to be overlooked. Because you've also got a horse like Hebronville in here who's got a little bit of a following. And he's run some good races. But I think Bordini, if he's got that tactical speed, he can sit just in off of Subtle Indian. If Subtle Indian comes up wanting for some reason, or he misses the break and doesn't want to run today, whatever it may be, maybe Bordini's one that you want to use and throw him in underneath and see how things go from a handicapping standpoint and try and get some value. These 4 races, you'll be able to see all of them on DRF Live tomorrow starting at 3 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock on the West Coast. And next week on this show, instead of going 4 races, going 2 with the commercial and 2, the first break will be a review. We'll go back and it'll either be a lot of sound effects of me saying terrible or yay, we did very well. The second part will be the 4 races that we'll handicap. So just giving you a little heads up. Things are going to be moving in flux. We'll also have guests, we'll have interviews and whatnot. So again, bear with us. We're figuring some things out here, but this is ultimately kind of the feel that we're going to get with this show going forward. Let's dive into our final commercial break for the debut effort. When we come back, we'll give you a little bit of a weekend preview considering the DRF family of tournaments. We'll give you a heads up on DRF Live, and we'll give you some, I guess we'll just call it a quirky video, a fun video that we'll talk about. Stay with us on the Matt Bernier Show.
Does your online wagering platform want you to win? If they did, wouldn't they help you win? At DRF Bets, we're all about raising your game. That's why we give our players the data, tools, and know-how that no other service can. For starters, DRF Bets is the only place you can get free DRF PPs when you wager. But we don't stop at PPs. With free access to DRF Plus, DRF Bets members get the kind of insider information you can't get from a PP. Like behind-the-scenes news coverage and live trackside reporting about changing conditions, biases, workouts, and more, right from the horse's mouth. Plus, free DRF selections, closer looks, and a full range of premium reports, like our popular daily game plan. And since 70% of betting is on exotics, DRF Bets provides special support for players, including weekly bonuses, and our exclusive Ticket Maker wagering app that helps you win more on exotic wagers. We've also made rewards simple. The DRF Bets Rewards program gives you back more of what you wager, period. DRF Bets is more than a place to wager. It's a platform to help you play better and win more, whether you're home or on the go. Brought to you by the folks who love racing as much as you do. Does your wagering platform do all of that?
Turning for home, the Matt Bernier Show, the debut effort. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. Always want to hear your thoughts, your concerns, your questions, your comments, better or worse, whatever it may be, on Twitter, at Bernier_Matt. Before we dive into setting up the plate for this weekend here on DRF, Jay Harrison at Electrocution has tweeted and asked, would it be possible to give a quick shout out to the race that Keen Ice is going to run in tomorrow and how we think he stacks up? Ultimately, keep in mind, this is nothing more than a prep for Keen Ice going into the Dubai World Cup. He's going to run against Mubtahij. Now, I've always been a bit of a fan of Mubtahij. I can understand his most recent start was an absolute debacle. So he's going to need to move forward. But Mike DeCock is generally a trainer that can move forward with a horse second and third off the bench. The one thing I'll say about Keen Ice, and this isn't, I'm not trying to ruffle any feathers, I think Keen Ice would have been a horse much better suited in a race like the Santa Anita Handicap. I know Santa Anita is generally speed friendly. I think he would have been better going to a race like that, $1 million race, where, look, he's still eligible for non-winners of 3 Lifetime. I get he beat American Pharoah. He had the setup of Lifetime. He's that sort of grinder who's going to come along late. And I understand $10 million, it's easy for me to sit here and say, run for $1 million instead of 10. That just makes it sound like, and look, I'll look like an idiot when he goes and wins the World Cup in a few weeks. I just think he would have been better off getting, I think he would have been arguably the favorite of the horse to beat in a race like the Big Cap, the way it's shaping up. Maybe not the horse to beat, but he would have been one of the choices. In the World Cup, boy, you've got to deal with Chrome, Frosted, Opportunity, just keep going on and on and on. Emshawish, a bunch of really good horses. Look, Keen Ice is a nice horse. I'm not trying to, bash him or anything, but I think he's the kind of horse that they should have probably gone the FNX route with. That's just my opinion. He should have gone the Big Cap. Look, tomorrow, it's a prep, so if he doesn't win, don't be stunned. I think you're just going to want to see him run on at the end, and they'll get ready for the World Cup. So that's my thought on the race tomorrow going on out at Dubai with Mubtahij and Keen Ice. Let's set things up here for the DRF Tournament family of websites here for this weekend. We've got a graphic for you. It's brought to you by DRF Tournaments, obviously. Let's start off with the NHC Qualify event this weekend, Saturday, March 5th, $190 entry fee. Up to 4 packages will be awarded. 3 of them are guaranteed. The packages include NHC entry, 4 nights at the Treasure Island Hotel and Casino, $1,000 travel stipend. Also worth noting, the NHC Tour points are available to the top 10% of the finishing runners in this contest. You're going to want to get involved with that if you're playing in the year-long NHC Tour. Breeders' Cup, bcqualify.com, Sunday, March 6th, $100 entry fee. This is one of the round 2 events going into round 1 going into round 2, I should say. The top 10% will advance to round 2. In round 2, up to 8 full Breeders' Cup betting challenge packages will be rewarded. That's a $10,000 BCBC entry and a $500 travel stipend. The $10,000 BCBC entry breaks down to $7,500 live bankroll to play with. $2,500 is an entry fee, and you can play at a bunch of satellite areas. But I think at this point, don't you want to go to Santa Anita? You want to be there for the Breeders' Cup in early November this year. And DRFqualify.com. This one, I'm not trying to say that the NHC or the BC Qualify events are the sort of second thoughts for this weekend, but you're getting down to the nitty-gritty on DRFqualify.com. Saturday, March 5th and Sunday, March 6th. $200 entry fee for each contest. You can't one each, $25, $250, and $250. Up to 3 UBC packages each day. 2 of them are guaranteed. You're probably asking what the heck the UBC is. It's the Ultimate Betting Challenge. It's going to be going on simultaneously at Gulfstream Park and Santa Anita Park, and that's coming up in March, in a few weeks actually, so you got to get on this thing. 69 entries are going to be involved. 1 package per 23. 2 of them are going to be guaranteed. This is both days. The packages include $4,500 entry and a $500 travel stipend. You want to get involved on all 3 of the DRF tournament family of websites: nhcqualify.com, bcqualify, drfqualify.com. Let's take a look at the slide we have for this Saturday as far as DRF Live is concerned. Again, 3 Eastern is when we're going to come on. Dan Illman, Mike Beer will bring you through the beginning part of it. I'll hop in, Mike and I will swap out. But that's ultimately what we're looking at. I think a lot of people will key in on the Gotham Stakes, but you've also got some good graded action down at Gulfstream with the Gulfstream Handicap and the McDermott. We've got the return, and I can't believe I haven't even discussed her yet, and I wasn't going to be insulting to any of you and saying that Songbird's the most likely winner of the Santa Isabel. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to figure that one out. We'll also be going over her as well. We're really taking you through the final 5 races as far as the Gulfstream Rainbow 6 is concerned tomorrow, so you're going to want to stay tuned. DRF Live starting at 3 Eastern, noon Pacific tomorrow here, live.drf.com. Now, this is going to be going forward. For those of you that have stuck it out, those of you that have come along late, thank you. We really appreciate you kind of checking things out. For the first time we're doing this, so ironing the kinks out of it. This is always going to be a horse racing show, but there's going to be a little bit of sports involved. There's going to be a little bit of pop culture and whatnot. This little video right here, this is from spring training. This is Yoenis Cespedes and Noah Syndergaard, and they're on horses. Now, Syndergaard, a.k.a. Thor, obviously one of the best pitchers for the team. Can we run it one more time just to really get that in? This is Yoenis Cespedes in a cowboy hat who just went and signed a contract with the Mets for gobs and gobs of money. Now, the big talk had been him coming into spring training over the past few days with numerous different rides. He had a little 3-wheeled thing, a custom car. I don't even know what you call it. Then he showed up in another beautiful-looking car. I believe it was a Lamborghini. No surprise. Just wanted to kind of give a shout out to the, I'm sure he had all of us in mind, the horse racing community, when they came in. And he got a hold of the biggest guy you could possibly find, 7 foot tall, 250-pound Noah Syndergaard to get on top of this horse. So just having some fun in spring training, just in case, if Johnny V can't make his mount, if Javier's got somewhere else to go, the people down at Tampa or at Gulfstream, they can quick call up the Mets and say, hey, look, we need Cespedes. Get him down here to Gulf. So a fun little video. We'll have some other stuff going forward as well. We've got a really funny one already on tap for next week if we can get it, but I'm not going to give you too much of that. But all in all, I just want to say thank you for everyone that stuck through it. Any comments, questions, suggestions, good or bad, you can send them to me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Mike Claudio, producer in the other room, very well done today. We'll come back. This is the first one. We're going to do it again every Friday starting at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific.